did a lot of community meetings for things like expanding our bicycle network. We created over 600 miles of protected bike lanes and about 1,500 miles of bike lanes overall, building on the very good work begun during the Bloomberg administration before I was in my position. And all of those projects, though, on a block-by-block basis, required some negotiations with community boards to help win their support, and sometimes to proceed despite local opposition. Parking, of course, is always a contested issue in cities where parking is scarce, and so a lot of consultation was required. We also did a lot of very good work, which continues now, developing a bus lane network for New York City to speed up the buses. For example, on 14th Street across Lower Manhattan, we turned a very slow bus travel experience into a much faster experience for 50 or 60,000 bus passengers an hour who travel across Lower Manhattan on buses on the 14th Street corridor by reserving that corridor just for buses and goods delivery trucks, with local access still provided, but only on a block-by-block basis. I think it takes a multiple stream approach. In some cases, we had community ambassadors who would go out and meet with people at bus stops and just talk to people on the street about projects to help socialize those. In other cases, we would go to community board meetings and meet with people who would come together for those. Yet again, we would put out a lot of public information campaigns and have leadership from the top talk to these issues. The mayor, Bloomberg, at that time, held a series of town hall meetings in each of the community boards around the city. I think there are about 60 of them. And so nearly every week there would be a community board town meeting with the mayor to talk about issues, and a lot of things would surface there, and then there would be follow-up. There was also one of the signature campaigns that we did during the de Blasio administration was Vision Zero, where we worked through a variety of approaches to reduce road traffic deaths by a quarter overall, and cut pedestrian deaths by 40% over a 5-year period by reducing the speed limit citywide to 25 miles an hour, by doing a redesign of streets and intersections to make it safer to walk and bike, by also doing much more enforcement with automated cameras for speed limitation and stop traffic lights, and then also doing intense public education. And we had multimedia efforts to reach out to the public with hard-hitting messages about how you drive matters and can save lives. And that had, I think, a real impact. There were times, too, when we faced challenges because of people in some areas not wanting to lose a few parking spaces to, for example, have a protected bike lane or to make an intersection safer. And it took mayoral leadership to say, no, it's the right thing to do. We need to protect public health. And we got that support most of the time. We were benefited that Mayor de Blasio, when he first ran for office of mayor, made Vision Zero one of the centerpieces of his campaign, and said we should take this idea that had been developed in Sweden and applied in some other places and bring it to New York. And Mayor Bloomberg, before de Blasio, had already begun some of the very good safety initiatives that we built on during the de Blasio administration. So The mayor, in fact, at the beginning said he wanted the heads of, or senior people from about a dozen different city agencies to get together and meet once every 2 weeks to talk about how to work through problems and challenges to implement Vision Zero. And I would give great credit to the mayor for his leadership in bringing those agencies together and instructing them to continue to work together effectively to make progress and to renew their strategic campaign every year on the basis of scientific observation of what was working and what wasn't working. And that interagency consultation was invaluable. You'll never convince everyone of anything that you're trying to do, but I think the idea with community meetings is you want to make sure people feel that they're heard and that their concerns are understood. And if it turns out that what is dictated by public safety requires going forward against those other concerns that may be held by locals, you want to at least articulate in a principled way why action, despite local concerns, is important, and be principled in stating that. And where possible, also redesigning and adapting the action in ways that take into account local concern. And so it's a balancing act. Well, for example, the 14th Street busway initiative required some negotiations over, I think, several key issues. One was loss of local access for people who have disabilities to be able to have a taxi or a friend come and pick them up or drop them off in front of their building on this busy street. And so we accommodated that by allowing cars to come in, but only for one block, and then they would have to turn off, and designating some pickup and drop-off zones. We also had to deal with goods movement because you had a lot of businesses that had no alley access and could only load and unload with trucks on the street. And so we regulated the hours that the trucks could access goods loading zones and designated those zones in ways that would be compatible with effective bus movements. I think all politics is local, and so you have to work with the local culture that you're faced with, and at the right moment in time, proceed in the correct manner. There's not a single path forward. In general, though, I do think there's an advantage to tactical urbanism of being able to do things quickly and then make corrections, sometimes to withdraw them. But more often than not, when you implement temporary measures, people like what they see, and then there's support for going forward, and as you fine-tune it to make it better and make it more permanent. I think it's often the case in New York City and other big cities that very good initiatives get bogged down in excessive delays because of the cumbersome nature of procurement and going through an elaborate design process where one agency has to then pass designs on to another agency to implement. So it's better to proceed quickly with temporary materials and see what works, make adjustments, and then if you need to, in the long run, to go through a longer process to build it out more permanently. But proceeding quickly is often the best thing to make progress in cities. Yeah, the Open Restaurants program, extremely popular with restaurant owners and the public. I myself was surprised at how little pushback we got to taking and converting 10,000 parking spaces for use as outdoor cafes. It literally saved 10,000 jobs in the restaurant industry over the last several years, and brought back the spirit of New York, because people were feeling very low during the time of COVID. The ability to be social in public spaces was so limited. And so it brought back the spirit of the city, and now it's helping to support bringing back tourism and bringing back a sense of vitality on the streets. In Europe, I think New York now feels more European than it ever has because of the open restaurants program. The shopkeepers adjacent to the open restaurants, I think it's a mixed thing. I think most of them support the open restaurants. In fact, some even make available space in front of their shops for an expansion of the outdoor dining, because it brings more traffic to their retail spaces. And others, of course, have some concern about parking, but the reality is that most shoppers in New York neighborhoods are not driving a car to get to a shop. They're walking, they're taking public transportation, or they're using a bicycle. There's an open streets program that we developed in parallel with open restaurants, and that's also been very supported and effective. Of course, there have been some neighborhoods where people don't want to give up driving their car through a local street, and so the little barricades that were put up for these to create them were taken down by some neighbors. But in other places, these have been very popular. There's a big challenge in how you administer these things. If you make a program like open restaurants seasonal, then the restaurants have to store their equipment for the tables and chairs and coverings somewhere off-site. So it will, I think the seasonal program will work against small businesses and work in favor of the large, deeply capitalized restaurants that can afford this. And that's an unfortunate effect that may happen if this program becomes seasonal rather than year-round permanent. I mean, the program has, since we implemented the open restaurants program in May of 2020, it's undergone some evolution, and it's now a bit more formal process for application, but it's being made permanent. There's discussions going on even now. A bill was introduced just in the last couple of weeks in the New York City Council to make the program permanent but seasonal. That program is now being made permanent. The City Council is debating whether to make it permanent as a seasonal program or as a year-round program. And there are some who are concerned that the sheds are not as well used in the coldest time of winter, and so they should be taken out. On the other hand, if you force the restaurants to take out their restaurant sheds in the winter, then only the most affluent restaurants can afford to maintain the open restaurant program, and that works against small businesses and small restaurants. So the main opposition to open restaurants, I think, today comes from nearby residents who are concerned about noise or, proliferation of rats and other things that can happen with food waste. But that again is a matter of effective administration of the program to make sure that there isn't too much noise too late at night.